All right, guys, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. If you're someone who is seeking uncommon results, this podcast is for you. Success, happiness, and wisdom. What do these words mean to you? I think we can all agree that we'll probably all have slightly different definitions of each. In these podcasts, I get to dive deeply into conversations with some amazing innovators, influencers, and trendsetters that have had different versions of how they define the terms, yet have come out on the other side with amazing, uncommon results. At some point in their lives, they have decided to unshackle themselves from the norm and go beyond all boundaries. Well, again, welcome to the show, Beyond All Boundaries. I'm John Dwyer, the host, and today I got a great guest and friend, Shaun McCloskey. Shaun, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
It's good to have you here. So Shaun runs Leadership Boardroom, and I've gotten to know Shaun now. Geez, it's only been about 8 months, but I feel like I know you pretty well, and I've just really appreciated our friendship and what you've been doing for me in my life and business. And Shaun, why don't you start out just talking about Leadership Boardroom a little bit and some of the things that you're talking about, and then we'll just kind of dig into the things that you want to share today.
Well, in a nutshell, Leadership Boardroom is simply a mastermind mixed with coaching. I run 4 coaching groups. I also have 3 coaches that run multiple groups for our organization. And we do 2 things. Basically, we help high-level entrepreneurs live both their personal and their business vision. It sounds a little corny, but first and foremost, I would argue that the overwhelming majority of business owners has goals, especially the successful ones. Very few of them have vision. And so the difference between vision and goals is like, I can set a goal all day long. I can hit the goal, and I can hit that goal, let's say a financial goal, at the expense of everything else that I said I cared about. Right. And so, if you don't have vision that precedes the goals, you're putting yourself in a little dangerous position. So I help people like John, figure out what the heck their personal vision is so that they can build a life that serves their personal life too, instead of just having the business take over everything. And as simple as that sounds, man, it is simple, but it's not easy to do. And so that's what I help people do.
It's not easy to do, right? And there's a lot to it. But I want to start back out because it was kind of funny about how you and I got to meet. And I was at one of your speaking events.
Yeah.
And Shaun was talking about master speaking and all the speaking coaching that he does, and then tying into Leadership Boardroom. And they had this predictive index. So do you want to talk a little bit about predictive index?
Oh, yeah.
And then when I got on stage, and then you can rip on me a little bit. But anyway, so we had to do this thing called the predictive index that tells you about certain traits, and it's probably one of the most accurate type of testing there is as it relates to personality traits and things like that. Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I take people through this vision process, and so the event he's talking about, I teach national speakers how to be more effective at the front of the room. I usually do that event once or twice a year. And so, here we're at this event, there's 130 national speakers in the room, and I take them through this process. Now, when I teach the vision stuff, there's 4 stages to this, which actually we'll talk about a little bit today. But part of stage 2 is called know thyself. And so know who you are, know what your strengths are, know what they aren't, know what your personality kind of looks like and what you should be doing, what you should never be doing. And part of that process is I take people through this thing. My brother has been a master trained predictive index analyst for about 10 or 11 years now. And he also takes people through traction and things like this to get their business figured out. But anyway, so we took everybody there in the audience through this predictive index survey. And it's basically, when you see this, it's about a 6 or 7 minute survey is all it takes to go through the whole process. And I will know more about you in 6 or 7 minutes than some people who are really close to you. And it's insane how accurate it is. It's 99.7% accurate. It is the most accurate one on the market. And it is the only one that you can use to hire and fire people legally. So some of you may have heard of things like DISC, strengths finders, things like that. Those are profilers too. Unfortunately, they're not legal to use in hiring. And the reason they're not legal is because they're asking you forced questions and they're not as accurate. And so this is spot on. So what was cool is John came up as one of the guinea pig volunteers up on stage, which was pretty awesome. And my brother went through a whole read back of his profile, and it was pretty funny, man. He nailed your personality like spot on. Matter of fact, there was even a couple times that John was like, I don't know if I'm like that. And my brother basically showed him the chart and said, yeah, of course you don't think that you're like that. This is where your chart says that you wouldn't think you're like that, but that's how you are. Ask your mom. She'll tell you the same thing. Right. And it was spot
Right.
on.
Yeah, I know. And the Maverick was arguing with him that the fact that the test wasn't accurate, right, on
stage. Or which is like, you turn to page 3 and see where you like to argue about things with everyone. You know, it's like, okay, maybe that is me.
So anyway, yeah. So I was on stage, and then so my read back was just talking about my personality and how I, you know, very strong minded and just kind of do things the way that I want to do them, right? And anyway, so right. But so after that, I remember you were talking to Maria, my wife, and you were just like, man, he's kind of a tough guy. And then, but you and I started to talk. Oh yeah. And you know, Shaun and I hit it off, and I joined Leadership Boardroom. And for all the listeners out there, I can tell you, you know, I've had a lot of business coaching. I've had other coaching. I mean, I think it's important, right? Like if any successful athlete or anybody else has coaches, why don't we have coaches in the business world? But what I will tell you about what Shaun's really helped me and my wife has even joined Leadership Boardroom is just really many areas, but really the vision and really how to, you know, work inside that personal vision first and not overcome the business, because it's so easy that as business owners, right, as entrepreneurs, we can get buried and drained in what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and we ruin everything around us.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? And throughout my life, a lot of my coaching has been around business, and I've been, you know, blessed and been successful in what we've been doing over at Solid Rock Financial Group. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's at the cost of everything. And so Shaun is, you know, and what Shaun has really helped me out with is just really, you know, taking a step back and figuring out what it is that I really want for my life. And I know that you're going to talk about this. I don't want to steal your thunder because this is, you know, this is your podcast, right?
Well, here's the deal, man. You know, I ask entrepreneurs this question all the time. I say, why did you get into business for yourself in the first place? And the answer is always some version of freedom. They all want freedom. And I say, how's that going for you? How long have you been in business, and how free do you feel? And, you know, I talk to people who've been in business 2 years and people who've been in business 20 years, and very, very few of them feel free. Now, they might have the freedom of not having to answer to a boss, but most of the time they have to answer to hundreds of bosses now, which are their clients, you know, or thousands even sometimes, or their staff, or the demands that the business puts on them all the time. So they're not any more free than when they had a job. They're a different kind of free, perhaps. But it's like, if that's the thing you want from your business, why don't you design it with that in mind? And so, you know, I don't know about you, but the new buzzwords are like hustle and scale and all of these words. And there's nothing wrong with hustling when it's appropriate, and scaling and all of these buzzwords that are going around today. But man, I see men and women, men especially, doing this at the expense of everything else that they say they care about. It's like, well, I'm doing this for my family. Really? Have you checked in with your family to see how you're doing in that department? Because, you know, most of the families that I talk to aren't too happy with the fact that dad's working 90 hours a week and never home and present. And so, you know, are you really doing it for your family, or are you doing it for you? And so if you struggle with this stuff at all, like if you, for those of you that feel too busy, or even worse, some people have gotten so used to the hustle and the grind, they call it, that they wear it as a badge of honor now. And, you know, that's all great. But I will tell you, I've been coaching now for 13 years, and I've coached many, many men and women who are later in years who look back, and not one of them has ever said, man, you know what, I wish I would have done more. I wish I would have worked more. Not one of them said that. There's things that they wish they would have tried, perhaps, or accomplished or experienced, that they wish they would have done at a higher level. There's a lot of personal things that entrepreneurs tend to miss out on, but not one of them says, I really wish I worked more hours. You know, and so my job is to help people figure out, how do you be more productive in the time that you do have allotted for work, so that you can also have a life. And if you want to do that, you got to determine, what's the life look like in the first place. And so if you don't know what that looks like, you'll do what I call default. So if you have no clue what you would do if you did have more free time, you'll default. And some people, you know, you see a lot of people default today to video games, or you see people default to, some people default to something perhaps productive like the gym. But most entrepreneurs default to work, right? They get some more free time in what they do. They add more things into their next set of business goals. They fill it up with more work, more things that they could be producing. And so it's this never ending spiral of, how you're going to get the life that you want if you're constantly defaulting to work and you don't have anything to fill that up. I remember I was learning about the gentleman that started Alcoholics Anonymous, 100 something years ago. And when people used to come to him, they would say, I need to stop drinking. And the first thing he would say to them is, you are not allowed to stop drinking. And they're like, whoa, no, I came here to stop drinking. He said, no, don't stop drinking. I forbid you to stop drinking. And they're like, what are you talking about? He said, you never stop drinking. You only replace drinking with something that you want more than drinking. And so you're never going to just stop it by pure willpower. You can do that for a period of time. But if there's something that you want more than the alcohol, you'll stop and you'll never do it again. And same thing goes with work. For those of you that are workaholics or absolutely love your business. Look, I love my business too. I absolutely love it. But today, I only have to work in my business 4 to 5 days a month. That's what it takes for me to maintain what I've got going on while still growing. If I want to take the rest of the month off, I can. Now, most months I don't because I love what I do. However, any given moment, I can take the whole rest of the month off. Matter of fact, this last month, we've traveled about 3 weeks of the month and had an absolute blast. I don't do that every single month, but I love what I do. I'm passionate about what I do. It makes really good. I still run a 7-figure business. And, but I've designed it in a way that serves all aspects of life, not just serving the business or just serving my customers. Yes, I want to serve my customers. Yes, I want to serve the world, but I also don't want to do it at the expense of personal life. So I've been yapping, but
no, but John, this is awesome. This is what I was hoping that you would just go, because you have so much insight and value to bring to so many people. And I just want to encourage the listeners out there. I too have a 7-figure business, and what Shaun has been able to help me and challenge me with on has been, not from a business perspective so much, but more from the personal side and where my blind spots were, and just my family and my life and the relationship with my wife. And I mean, we've even dug into that, right? And spending time on relationships and things like that. And so I think, this whole vision, I call it the whole vision, but this vision process that you take us through, if you really apply to that and do that, it's life-changing. And writing it down, right? And applying it. And, I as you were talking, I was kind of thinking about the idea, what's really important.
So you were saying how it's important to get it in writing and get it out of your head, which and you also said that I didn't challenge you as much yet in business as personal. And quite frankly, I didn't challenge you yet in business because you don't need any help there. You're self-driven in business. You already challenge yourself plenty there. Matter of fact, a guy like you, John, will challenge yourself so much there, and it's a game to you, and it's fun. And I love that about you. And it's also dangerous if you're challenging yourself there constantly and not challenging yourself to be a better father and to be a better husband and to, have hobbies again. I mean, holy cow. You wouldn't believe how many grown men I know and women that I know and coach that they haven't had any hobbies for 20 years. Or, you wouldn't believe how many 8-figure business owners that I know and coach that don't have any friends. They've got a whole bunch of acquaintances and business, how do you say it? Business acquaintances that they can talk business with, but they don't have any deep connecting friends that they can connect with on a deep level. And it's like, is that what you want? Is that why you got into business, so that you could have all the money in the world and have all the toys and everything in the world, and you got nobody to really, really experience them with? It's like, that's not what anybody ever says that they want from the beginning, but it ends up that way a lot. So yes, you do need to identify what the personal vision looks like. And no different than AA, when you have your personal vision figured out and you want that bad enough, you figure out ways to restructure your business in a way where you're not going to lose any business. You'll still continue to grow, but it doesn't require you to be in it as much, so that you can also enjoy some of the other aspects of your personal life as well. And when you can do that, that impresses me. It no longer impresses me to hear a guy say, well, I made 8 figures this year. I say, okay, well, how many hours did you work? Are you on your 3rd divorce? How's your relationship with your kids? How's your relationship with God? How do all these things look? Because it doesn't impress me for you to say, I got an 8-figure business and I'm killing it out there and nothing else in my life is going well. It impresses me when you say, man, I have a fantastic relationship with my wife. My kids and I have experiences together, and we spend time together, and I work with them, and I'm leaving a legacy for my kids, not just financial legacy. We spend time together. My health is where it needs to be. Yes, we get to travel if that's something that you want to do. And we just experience life together. And by the way, my business is kicking butt and taking names too. That impresses me, but no longer does one thing impress me.
Right. And I think, you know, what I thought was the most challenging too is I think part of that is fear, right? When you're just like, you got to burn it down and you just have to write as what you want. And, you know, you talk about the engineer mind, right? And just write stuff down of what it is that you want. And I think for me, right, sometimes it's like, there's no way this is going to happen. Like all these things that I want, there's no way it's going to happen. Right. And
let's talk about that for a second.
I think you have an awesome story about that, right? Because so I'd love for you to share that.
If we can, I'll take you through a little bit of the process, and forgive me, this is something I normally teach in 3 days, but we'll try to get through as much as we can here on however long this podcast is going to be. But, you know, stage 1 of this entire process is called Dare to Dream. And when I say dare to dream, I mean just dare to dream with 0 filters. And this sounds really easy, but man, most people can't do this when I first ask them to do it. It takes a little bit of practice. And the reason most people can't do it is because they start to dream. And when I say dream, it's like, just dream, if I could have life look any way I wanted, or business look any way I wanted it to look, how would it look? That sounds really easy, but there's about 1,000 questions underneath that question that come into play. How many staff would you want to have? Not how many do you think you need? What kind of team would you build? What kind of characteristics would they have? Who would your ideal customer be? All of these questions, like if the perfect world existed, what would that look like? And I ask people to start getting that out of their head and in writing. And what happens inevitably every single time, matter of fact, I just did this with your wife over the phone yesterday during our coaching call, is every single time that people start to dream, but while they're dreaming, they start to try to figure out, well, how am I going to pull that off? And their dreams get stifled. And so if they can't figure out how I'm going to do it while they're dreaming, they stop dreaming. And this is the equivalent of, I share a story of how Disney runs their organization. Disney has 3 departments. You may not even know, if you work for Disney, you may not even know you're in one of these 3 departments, but you are in one of these 3 departments. You are either an Imagineer, so you're a visionary, you think of cool stuff all day, or you're an engineer, you figure out how to make things happen, or you are, they call it something else, but I call it the implementation department. You might be an implementer, okay? But if you work at Disney, you work at one of those 3. Now, here's the key for Disney. Those departments aren't allowed to talk. And so while the Imagineers are dreaming all day long, it's like their job. They dream of new ways to improve the theme park. They dream of, new movies, new storylines, new dresses for the characters in the story, new personalities for the character. All of these things they dream up, and they do not talk to the engineers until their dreams are fully figured out and on paper. Then they hand off the dreams to the engineer. And the way I describe it is like, there's a reason for this. Imagine for a second that the Imagineers and the engineers were in the same room together and they're all brainstorming, and what would the engineers be doing? Right?
Squashing it.
Yeah, I mean, they be go, well, you can't do that, and well, we don't have enough room in the theme park for that, and it's a great idea that you have an idea for a ride that will float through the park without any strings or metal or anything, but that's impossible. And so you hear that enough as an Imagineer, and guess what you start doing? You start stopping dreaming. And because everything that you start to dream, you go, well, that's not going to work. Well, that's not going to work. And you no longer dream. And this is where I found most, especially in this country, most of this country is today. We start to dream. The dreams get stifled because our inner engineer kicks in. And what you have to do, even if you're not a natural visionary, even if you're not naturally gifted in the Imagineering department, everybody can be an Imagineer for 5 minutes, just long enough to dream, what would life and business look like if it could look any way possible? And then shut that inner engineer up for a second, just long enough to dream, get it out of your head and get it on paper. There is an appropriate time for the engineer to step in and to say, is this dream even possible? Or how are we going to pull this off? That's where strategy comes in. That's where some coaching comes into play, perhaps finding somebody who's already paved that path before you have, and mirroring and modeling some of what they've done so that you can get there faster. And then, of course, there's an implementation department that needs to kick in too, which some of you don't have at all. Some of you are great dreamers and you can't implement anything. And so you may need a team to help you implement. But the bottom line is this works. I mean, I started this process. This has now been 12, 13 years ago. And I think what you were referring to before, John, is I was just sharing at our last coaching retreat that I hadn't looked at every single previous version of my vision, because I redo this process about twice a year. And so I hadn't looked at every single version of it since, I usually look at the last version that I wrote or something when I'm writing my new version of my vision. But this is the first time in January of this year that I looked at every single version since inception. And what's crazy is that things that I wrote down in the beginning that were absolutely impossible, and I mean impossible to pull off, I have pulled off 99% of what I wrote down. And there's a couple things left that I hadn't done that actually never made their way to the top of the priority list. But things that I wrote down back then that were completely impossible are 100% true now. Everything from the house that I live in, the street that I live on, the family that I have, the coaching organization that I have, the people that I'm coaching. I wrote down at one point that I would be able to impact leaders, like world leaders, business leaders. When I wrote that down, it was like, I got no business impacting the garbage man out front. Yeah. And I have no idea how to do that, nor do I have any influence whatsoever, nor do I have any experience to even help those people. But I wrote it down anyway because that's what I wanted. And today, that's what my entire business is. It's crazy how this stuff works, but it starts with dreaming. And the key to dreaming is shut that inner engineer up just for a little bit so that you can dream. Make sense?
Yeah, totally. And what's interesting, as you were talking about, again, the Imagineers and the engineers, and you said, they separate them, and can you imagine what it would be like in the room together? But the reality is that we're in that room as we're trying to go through this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what the challenge.
Yeah, because the room is this.
The room is like, and I call that stories, the stories and the crap that we tell ourselves too, right? All that negative self-talk and things like that. It's just, oh, that would be great, but, or I'd like to do that, but it can't happen.
Yep.
Right. And I mean, I even and Shaun has spent a lot of time on the phone with me. And I mean, as we're talking, like, dude, he's so full of shit. This is never going to happen. Right. But the idea of it is, the idea of it is, right, is that, but if you don't put it down and you don't just burn it down and you just don't allow yourself to dream it, you'll never accomplish it anyways.
Let me address what you just said, because you said burn it down, and people aren't familiar with that process. I know you are, but the burn it down process came as a result of, I was working with a guy. This is a national speaker, a guy who runs a national coaching organization called Larry Goins. Larry is one of the brightest guys I've ever met. I mean, he's just absolutely brilliant. I started coaching him and his team about maybe 3 years ago. And when I sat down with him, he was in a weird spot because he was having a hard time having any free time whatsoever. When I started to investigate why he was having such a hard time enjoying life at all. Like, for example, he had a Harley Davidson he hadn't driven in like 2 years. He's so busy working and building his companies, and he's not doing his hobbies anymore. He's not being the father that he wants to be and the husband that he wants to be, and he doesn't have any hobbies anymore. And it's like, why did you get in the business in the first place? Well, come to find out, he had about 13 businesses that he was running at the time, and he was in real estate. And when I would ask him, what business are you in? Which, by the way, about 99% of entrepreneurs cannot even answer that question. What business are you in? I know it sounds simple, but they give me, Larry would have said, I'm in the real estate business, which is not true. He had a hard money lending business. He had a training business online. He had a coaching organization. He actually does flip houses. He has a rental property portfolio. My gosh, keep adding these up. It was 13 different businesses. And so he wasn't just in real estate. He had 13 different businesses within real estate, all trying to grow all at the same time. All of them has their own marketing department. All of them has their own customer service. All of them has their own accounting. They're all different. You may say real estate, they're different. They're not the same business. And so when I was working with him, it was like, he came to the realization that I've got too much stuff going on, but I can't get rid of any of it. And I was like, well, why can't you get rid of any of it? Well, all of it feeds each other. So the real estate training company feeds the coaching company, and I can't stop doing deals because then I'm not a good teacher, and I can't stop loaning money because I loan money to my students and that helps them be successful. And so all of these things were intertwined together, and he couldn't give up any of it. And finally it hit me, and I said, dude, if we're going to dream, you are dreaming like he's thinking, what would I do if I could do anything? And then it's being stifled with the engineer going, but you can't give that up. You can't stop doing this. You can't do this. They depend on you for this. People need your income over here. You got employees over here. You can't get rid of that. You'd be letting them go. And finally it hit me. And I said, Larry, burn it down. He goes, what? I said, burn it all down, dude. I want you to pretend in your mind everything that you have right now is burned up in a terrible fire. I'm sorry, that sounds morbid, but it all burns up in a terrible fire. So you no longer have any businesses. You no longer have any staff. You no longer have a wife. You don't have any kids. You have nothing to tell you what to do or determine any course of action going forward. And I said, burn it all down. If you had nothing and you had to start all over, what would you do for business? And he thought about it for a second and he goes, well, I would need money. So the first thing I could do, the fastest I'd go out and find a house, I would flip a house. And I was like, well, hold on. That's not what I meant. Like, I want to know, what would you do even if you didn't need money? So let's say 2 criteria. Let's say everything burned down. And the second criteria is you have no immediate need for money. Let's just pretend like you're not wealthy beyond your means, but let's just say that you have all of your needs met and you're fine financially. So you don't have to do a knee-jerk reaction and go just do something that's going to make money. I want to know, what would you do if there was no filters, no money filters, no family filters, no staff filters, no expectation filters from your students or from anybody else in the world? What would Larry do? And no one had ever asked him a question like that. So in his mind, he's like trying to burn everything down. And he goes, you know what? It's actually really simple. I would only do, now this took, by the way, this took 4 hours of me working with him to get to this point, because he just wasn't seeing anything yet. But when I said burn it down, the first time he started dreaming with no filters. And he said, you know what, man? He goes, I would do 3 things. It's real simple. He goes, I would negotiate with people because I love negotiating. I'm really, really good at it. That's all I would do. And I would probably do that in real estate business because I know that game and I love it. Second thing, I would teach, but I would no longer teach where Larry was traveling 50 weeks a year, 50. Wow. In addition, that was 1 business out of 13 businesses. And so he said, I wouldn't travel anymore. But then guess what happened? His inner engineer kicked in and he goes, yeah, but that's never going to work. If you want to speak in the speaking business, you have to travel. And I interrupted. I said, thank you, engineer. I'm not talking to you right now. I'm talking to the Imagineer. What would the Imagineer do about speaking if he could do anything he wanted to do? And Larry said, man, I would still speak, but I would just do it. Like, I would teach just maybe 2 events a year. And you know what I would do if I could do anything? I would make all the students come to my office. And then his engineer kicked in, but they're never going to do that. They're never going to travel across the country. And I said, thank you, engineer. Shut up. I'm talking to the Imagineer right now. You know what I mean? And it's like, he got back into the Imagineer mode, got rid of the filters again. It's okay. If I could do anything, I don't know how I would pull that off, but I would literally do 2 events a year and they would all come to me and they would do it in my office at the end of the night. I'd be done. I get to go home to my family and that's it. And I was like, wow, that's cool. So you would negotiate deals, you would teach, but they would come to you. Anything else? And he goes, yeah. He goes, I would help my wife in our lending business because she loves that business and I like it, but it's not my thing, but I do love supporting her. And so if that's what she wanted to do, I would act as an advisor in that role and I would just help her. And I was like, okay, anything else? And he goes, nope, that's it. And I was like, wow, that is a far cry from the 13 businesses that you have going on. Now, as soon as I said that, his inner engineer kicked in again. He goes, oh my gosh, but if I only have these 3, then what's going to happen to my employees over here? And what's going to happen? And he started freaking out a little bit. I said, hold on, we're not done imagining. Let's just finish the imagining part. And we mapped all that stuff out. And then you can start to build a plan from there. But the whole point of this is that's the first time I believe Larry had dreamed in years, you know, and I don't mean just dreaming. I mean, dreaming with 0 filters whatsoever. It's not easy to do because you do care about what other people think and you do care about perhaps your staff. And, you know, Larry had a right arm business partner named Candace in that business. And he was constantly thinking, well, I want to do this, but I don't want to hurt Candace if I decide to go in a different direction. And, you know, this stuff is very simple, but it's not easy. Like we talked about before. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And, you know, to your point, right? Like, there's so many different facets, right? That you just continue to make stuff up, like business partnerships, relationships, or just always not worrying, but just like, okay, if I do that, that's going to impact this situation. Yes. You just, and it's amazing. Cause even when you were going through that with me, you know, you had to call me out on the engineer things a number of times too.
Yep.
Just the ability. And, you know, when I was thinking about one of our calls, the thing that had the biggest impact on me is when we were going through the vision process on the business side was when you were talking about your 3 buddies that traveled abroad. Do you want to get into that a little bit? Do you remember what I was talking about when the guys were traveling, but one guy had, like, they all wanted to stay longer, but there was impacts of their business and
yeah.
Kind of you sharing that with me actually had impact on some of the things that I was thinking about as it relates to my business too.
Yeah, I mean it's a great story. It's not my story. I had a business partner years ago named Steve, and he shared this with me. This actually happened from some of you in the real estate business might know. There's an old school guy named Pete Fortunato, and he shared this with Steve years ago. But Pete asked Steve. He said, "What? Tell me about your goals." You know, this is right when Steve was getting started. And he said, "Tell me about what some of your goals are." And Steve said, "Man, I want to have the biggest real estate organization in the world. I want to be in every major city. I want to flip houses all over the country." And Pete just sat and listened to him for a little while and said, "Are you sure you want to do all that?" And Steve's like, "Yeah, man, I want to kick butt and take names. I want to do all this. I got all these grand, huge ideas." And Pete said, "Steve, let me tell you a story real quick." He says, "Me and two of my best friends went over to Europe last year." He said, "I, at the time, happened to own about 15 properties free and clear. No loans on them, no nothing. Real simple business. My other buddy owns 10 properties free and clear. Real simple business. Our third friend has 1,000 rental properties, 1,000. Pretty successful guy, right? And they're all leveraged with debt, but he does pretty well with them. So we decide we've never been to Europe. So the three of us and our spouses, all six of us go to Europe for 2 weeks. And man, we have the time of our lives. We go over to Europe. We're having an absolute blast. We start getting towards the end of the 2 weeks and we go, man, we're having so much fun. We should stay another 2 weeks. And I looked at my wife and I go, we can stay another 2 weeks. And my other buddy with 10 free and clear rental properties goes, we can stay another 2 weeks. And my buddy with 1,000 rental properties leverage said, guys, we can't stay. We got to go home. We got work to do. He said, which one do you want to be? And he turned around and walked away. Now I always picture him turning around like as he slammed the mic down and walked away. That's not what happened, you know. But he turned around and walked away. And Steve said, I remember Steve used to share that story, and it really impacted me because it's like, do you want to build that because your ego says that you should, or do you want to build that because that's the thing that your vision says that you need in order to live all aspects of your vision? And I realized, man, after hearing that, how much of my ego gets involved in my decisions all the time. If I'm not careful and if I don't have this document in front of me telling me what I already decided is important to me, man, left to my own awful nature, my gosh, my ego gets in the way. And, you know, like I teach these events, for example, I teach this business vision stuff. I teach in a 3-day event. I teach it usually twice, maybe once or twice a year. And if I'm not careful, my desire to outdo my last event, like we had roughly 500 people at our event last year. And
that was the one in St. Louis, right? I mean, that was
right before COVID. Yeah. And so, but if I'm not careful with that kind of thing, I start going so crazy. Instead of me remembering why I'm doing it in the first place, which is to impact the people that are there, the goal setter in me goes, well, I want to get to 1,000 people this time. And I want to up the, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that until that starts to infiltrate everything else I say I care about in my vision too. Right. And I'll start to go after the goals and the numbers and so forth at the expense of everything else. It's my own nature too. Why is it there? Well, I don't know. Got a competitive drive. I think that's what we're taught in this country. And put the vision aside for the minute. Holy cow. Left to my own nature, I'm a disaster. I have to have this document in front of me all the time, you know?
And I think it was, it was really powerful for me too, because I was in that mindset of trying to, grow the organization nationally. And that story just had an impact on me. And it's like, what's the point? Or do you really want that? Right. Like, and what do you, in our last coaching call, or not call, but in our last boardroom, leadership boardroom, when we were in St. Louis, what was one of the main questions that we were talking about again? I have it written down on my notes, and of course I can't find them right now, but it was like, what do you want, or what do you want to have achieve, or how did Chuck put that? I can't remember exactly how he said it, but I thought it was really powerful. Do you remember that?
Well, I'm not sure which one, because we had so many good questions that were asked, but one of them is, it was, what do you really want? And you can emphasize, you can emphasize each of those words. So you can say, what do you really want? Or you can say, what do you really want? Or you can say, what do you really want? Or you can say, what do you really want? And I know that sounds cheesy, but when you ask that same question, those 4 or 5 different ways, it's like, do you really want this? Do you really want to go national? Yep. Or is that your ego telling you that you're supposed to? And again, nothing wrong with going national, nothing wrong with scaling, nothing wrong with going out and kicking butt and taking names. Here's the only thing I make sure of with all of my members. I make sure that going and as big as you possibly can isn't going to negatively infiltrate other things that you say you care about as well. So if you want to go big, great. but go big in a way that allows you to go big and still serve your family and your community and your health and your hobbies and the amount that you want to travel and all these things. One of the biggest challenges that I see for entrepreneurs that quote, finally hit it big financially is they, for example, I coach a guy that this guy sold his company about a year and a half ago. He cashed out. He's worked his whole life to get it to a certain level. He hit every financial metric he put in place and then sold it. He's sitting on, I don't know how many millions and millions of dollars, but let's just put it this way. He never, ever has to do anything again the rest of his life, and he's totally fine. And you would think that would be euphoric. And this guy who has spent 30 years building this went through a full-blown depression. That's when he came to me because he needed coaching. Full-blown depression, considering killing himself. And you go, how in the world would somebody who is sitting on millions of, he's accomplished everything he set out to accomplish, how in the world would he be depressed? It's like he's got so much of his identity wrapped up into his business that if he's not doing business, he has no clue who he is. Aside from business, he has absolutely no idea what life is about. And he's been doing that path for so long, 30 years, that he's never taken the time to contemplate what is life about if it's not about business? Who am I if I'm not the guy building a multi-million-dollar business? And he doesn't know the answer to that. And so now he does now. I've been working with him for a year.
Well, and why I brought that question up, because it sounds like such an easy question, but when you really dig into it, people can't answer it.
Well, and here's what people think. So I share that story with somebody who's broke and they're not there yet. And they go, well, that's stupid. That would never happen to me. It's bullshit, man. You should see how many people do this. And they spend so much of their energy building a business, and it works. You know, it doesn't always work, which actually makes things worse. They spend their whole life building a business that actually fails. Holy cow. Then you're really depressed. It's like, I gave up everything for this thing that didn't even work. But when it does work, which happens often, they have the same feelings. It's like, you know, if that's been their sole mission in life and then they accomplish it, it's kind of a depressing feeling to think, I accomplished this and now what? Most of these people find that they have all the free time in the world to do whatever they want, and they've got no one to do it with because none of their friends can do the thing. I mean, this one student of mine said, I can go anywhere, I can do anything I want. He bought a $1 million RV to go travel the world. He's like, nobody can go with me. I'm in this thing by myself. Not only that, I don't really have any friends to experience this anyway. I've got acquaintances all over the country. I don't have any deep connections. You know, his relationship with his wife isn't destroyed, but it's not great because he never focused on her. He focused on the business. His kids are now grown and they're out of the house, so they're not going to spend time with him. It's like, you know, that's not what anybody wants, but yet that happens all too often. So the solution to that is get your vision figured out. And when you're engineering, how am I going to pull this vision off? You engineer it in a way that pulls all of it off, not just the business.
Well, and that's important too. I mean, how many times have people just wanted to focus on the business vision, right? And what you really helped out is like, no, you need to do how can you even do a business vision if you don't do your personal first?
That's right.
That was some of the blind spots that I had too. With, I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna be focused on my business. And then you're like, no. We're gonna work on personal stuff first.
Pause, right?
Right. And then because then it'll lead into, but the power in that, and what I'm experiencing, the power in that is that will shape your business instead of your business shaping you.
Yep. Well, and it forces you to become a better business person because, for example, I work with people who work too many hours a week, let's just say. Let's say somebody's working 80 hours a week. One of the first assignments I'll give them is to figure out how to take one day a week off. And every time I do that, they stress out. I mean, these are men and women who often work 7 days a week for years at a time. And I say, your first assignment is to take a day off. And they always freak out. No, I'm in growth mode right now. I can't do that. Yes, you can. Think about the last time that you went on vacation. Were you more productive or less productive the day before you left? Most people are more productive because they go, I have to get the most important stuff done or else I'm going to have to work the whole time on vacation. Now, some of these same people do work the whole time on vacation. It's not even a vacation in the first place. But a lot of you understand what I'm talking about. You're more productive the day before. You didn't get every single thing done on your to-do list the day before vacation, but you got the most important things done so that you didn't have to do them while you're on your fun trip, right? And so if we treat our business like that every single day, first of all, you don't have to work 7 days a week. You don't even have to work 5 days a week. When I tell people to take a day off, they freak out. But what they find is when they take a day off, they actually become more productive in the time of that they have allotted for work. somebody once said that a job will expand to the time
Yep.
given to it, or something along those lines. And that's true. You know, you give somebody 40 hours to complete a job and they'll finish it in 40 hours. You give them 35 hours and they'll finish the same job in 35 hours.
Yep.
And you may say, well, it's not, you know, done to the same level. Look, it's good enough. The most important things are done. And so when somebody takes one day off and they come to the next retreat and they go, I did it, I'm more productive, I took one day a week off, I say, great, now your next assignment, you ready for this one? And they go, yes, put me in, coach, what is it? And I say, now you have to take 2 days a week off, you have to be done throughout the week by 5 each day. What? I can't do that. And I go, just like you just did, yes, you can. And they become way more productive. People who work less hours are way more productive than those who give themselves 70, 80 hours a week. It's not productive at all. I can show you countless studies that prove it. But that's how you make time for your vision. And by the way, you won't even do that unless you can replace that time working with something that you care about even more. That's why the personal vision is so important to have dialed in.
Yeah, it's been an awesome, you know, experience. And I think too, just the way that you set up the boardroom and how it works is that there's, you know, Shaun pairs us with you know, looking at all our productive indexes and people, he's very strategic in how he places the teams together. And, you know, when we go and we get in the hot seat, right, and maybe people are calling you out on your BS all the time, and it's powerful. I mean, you can't get away with anything there. Shaun can't even get away with anything in that room, right? So it's awesome, you know. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the structure of how you do that and kind of how it works, Shaun. If you want to talk about that, or if you want to talk about something else, go ahead.
Well, in terms of people, you know, what I found is it's really hard to see your own blind spots. You know, we all have limiting beliefs. We all have blind spots. We have things that we've been doing for years. We don't even know why we're doing them. I mean, perfect example for this is I never believed that I could build a business or run a business just based on my sole ability to communicate. That didn't compute with me at all, because my father was in the military, he was in the Army for 20 years. And in the Army, they teach you, get some work done. We don't pay you to think. We pay you to actually fill out our mission. You are expected to deliver the mission, and that's it. You do what you're told to do, and you work hard. And so for me, like, my ability to coach, speak, teach, that doesn't seem like work. So how dare me build a business around it? I mean, I just discovered this in the last 5 or 6 years. So I would build my business around all these manual labor things that required me to be heavily involved. So I did rehabs with houses and all these things. And, you know, finally one day I did an exercise called the Unique Genius Zone. And this changed my life. It's basically a paragraph that you can send out to, you want to send it to at least 12 people in an email. And the paragraph basically says, look, as a part of knowing thyself in my business and in my life, I want to figure out what am I good at and what I'm not good at. I would like for your help, friend or family member or coworker or whoever it happens to be. I'd like your help. Tell me what it is that when you think of me, what do you think I'm good at? What can you count on me for? What do you think my area of expertise is? What do you feel like comes naturally to me that may not come naturally to everybody else? Can you help me? I sent this out. It says to send it out to at least 12 people. I sent it out to 17 people. I got 16 responses back. All 16 people said some form of, you know, I feel like I can talk to you and tell you anything. I feel like you're a great communicator. You simplify things when you teach them in a way that everybody can understand. You're a great speaker and great coach. It was like all of these things were in the same category. And I looked at my business and I thought, if this is the area that God's gifted me in, because he certainly didn't gift me in accounting, that's for sure, but he did gift me in these areas, right? And nobody said you're great at accounting and figuring. I'm not good at those things. I can do them if I muscle my way through them, but that's not my area of gifting that God's gifted me. I am gifted in these areas. So it did a couple things for me. Number one, for the first time ever, it gave me permission to accept a compliment in these areas, which I never could do before. Number two, it made me look at my business. And I said, if this is my area of gifting, what percentage of my time right now is spent in my area of gifting? And I looked at that. I was like, I looked at my calendar of everything I'd been doing in the last few weeks. And I thought maybe 5% of my day is spent communicating, teaching, sharing, having people open up, helping other people. The rest of it was spent with stuff, labor, things that I thought were productive, but were not in my gifting. And I just had a thought. I thought, first of all, what would happen if I changed from 5% to 50% of my time was spent in my unique genius zone, what would that business look like? And I started to dream. Now, my inner engineer kicked in because I heard my father in this ear going, well, that's not work, boy. You don't just talk and get paid for it. That's not work at all. That's too easy. And so I felt guilty for a minute about building a coaching organization or a mastermind organization or just spending all of my time helping other people, which is what I do today. I felt guilty about it. But when I got past the preconditioning of what my father was ringing in my ear here, it's like, well, sure you can. Who said you can't? And I decided that next year I'm gonna do whatever I have to do to get 50% of my time spent in the areas of communication, teaching, coaching, listening. And I did that. And the next year, guess what happened? First of all, I loved what I was doing. I absolutely loved it. I didn't even feel like I was working anymore. Second of all, in 1 year, my income multiplied 400%. I made 4 times more the next year than I ever made my entire life. It's like, but I have this conditioning in my head. I couldn't have seen that on my own. That came as a result of me being around other really smart people, which is what I put together in Leadership Boardroom, being around really smart people who challenge my beliefs. Why can't you build a business that way? Who told you that shit in your head that you've chosen to believe? It's like, well, I didn't see it, but they pointed out to me that that belief didn't come from me. It came from my father, which didn't come from him. That came from 20 years in the military. That makes sense?
Absolutely. So what would
crazy.
be, in this podcast, right? It's all about entrepreneurship, influential people talking about things that have made successful. And so I want to ask this question, and it's kind of a cliche question, but for the people out there listening and all the advice and all the things that you've coached very successful business owners, what is the one thing that you see that everybody should do?
Well, I mean, it's as cliche as it sounds. We've been talking about it this whole time. Get your vision figured out. Spend the time. Do the work. It's not easy work. You don't have to spend a week away doing it and spending 8 days, on an island and just writing it all out. You can do it in 10-minute chunks. As you think of this, what I do is I have a vision section in the notes section of my phone. And every time I think, man, it would be cool if I could do this, I get it out of my head and I get it in writing. And then every so often I go back and address it and I say, well, is this really important to me? Is this what I really want? Is this what I really want? And I ask those questions. And then it's surprising, man, how when you get this stuff out of your head, even if you never look at it again, it's surprising what percentage of things actually come true if you'll just dream them. It's crazy. It's crazy. You guys know this in your business. You do this all the time. Why not do it in every aspect of your life? You dream big on your health, dream big on where you want to go travel this year, dream big on what you want your faith to look like. I remember in the faith department, for example, when I first wrote down my vision for what I wanted my faith to look like, I had no faith whatsoever. I was agnostic at best, maybe borderline atheist. And I wrote down, I don't believe in God, but if I could do anything I wanted in that department, I would believe him. I would know that God's real. I would feel him. I would hear him speak to me. And I wrote all that down. And in my head, I'm like, this is all bullshit. It's never going to happen. And you'd be surprised, man. Like today, I have a very strong foundation in my faith. And today now is when people are going to think I'm crazy, but I actually hear from God, and I don't mean I audibly hear from him, but I mean, when I journal, things come out in my journaling that aren't even from me. And to some of you, that might sound crazy, but I get it. That would have sounded insane to me 15 years ago too. But, this is the power of vision and writing it down and getting it out of your head. Even if the engineer in your head doesn't have any clue how you're going to pull that off, right? There's no recipe that says, well, here's exactly how you hear from God. That's not how it works, but you write it down and then things start to show up. So get it out of your head, man. Write it down. You'd be surprised. And then if you want, of course, come spend 3 days with us. So I actually don't even have a business vision workshop planned right now, but I'll show you guys how you can get on the list here in a minute of how you can.
Why don't you do, and I'm glad you got the question right. I was kind of going to give you a hard time if you didn't say vision.
All right.
I was setting you up. So good job.
Hey, dummy.
Yeah, I know, right? That's good. So why don't you, in all honesty, why don't you share, because for everybody listening, I tell you what, I mean, I can't speak enough about what Shaun's Leadership Boardroom does, the structure, how he puts it together, the things and the challenges that we have. And again, it's amazing how it's not just business focused, but it'll grow and impact your business in ways that you can never imagine. So, man, I just hope that people reach out to you, Shaun, and why don't you share with how they can get in contact with you? And people, if you have any questions with me, by all means, reach out to me. I'll give you the real lowdown on Shaun McCloskey. But why don't you share with the listeners how, and also just as how they, because I know you don't have any programs scheduled right now, but I just think it's so important and impactful. And I think you could just change so many people's lives and just even conversations, right? And just people, because again, so many people are thinking about these things and they just don't even know where to go or directions that they should take. So why don't you share with how they can get in contact?
Yeah, I don't want to turn this call or anything like I just wanted to come here and share. And I don't have anything to sell at all. What I will say is we do this business vision workshop usually once a year, sometimes twice a year, but it's usually once a year, right around the beginning of the year. And I feel like that's a great way to get your year off on the right foot. And so, I don't have anything scheduled right now for the end of this year yet, but we're working on that in the next couple months. So if you want to go to businessvisionworkshop.com, what I'll do there is I will give you the opportunity to opt in and put in your name and email address. And if you want, I'll give you some free, really, really good resources. There's a couple things that you'll benefit from. I have what's called the Wheel of Life and the Wheel of Business that'll rate you right now. You rate yourself on where you're at, how you doing in life. And it rates you in about 11 different categories. And then in business, it does the same thing, but I believe there's 15 different categories in business. You know, how 0 to 10, how are you rating yourself in terms of, you know, your health? How are you rating yourself in terms of your relationship with your spouse, with the rest of your family, whether you have kids or the rest of your immediate family? How you doing in the travel department? Is that something you even want to do? And you score yourself 0 to 10. It tells you on this wheel how you look. The other thing that I'll give you guys when you go there and put your email address in is, of course, I'll let you know when we do another event, maybe in 4, 5, 6 months. But also I'll give you the wording for the Unique Genius Zone exercise. And I strongly recommend you guys do that. It's a paragraph. You send out at least 12 emails to friends that you've had 20 years, friends you've had for 2 years. It could be coworkers that you work with right now. It could be coworkers you used to work with. You want a wide variety of people to send this to so that you can get feedback from them and see if you see patterns. Because most of you are unique geniuses in certain areas. And what I'm interested to see is, does your role in business line up with your unique genius zone? That'll tell me real quick how fulfilled and happy you are, by the way. When you're doing what I believe God designed you to do in business, not only are you going to be more productive, you're going to be more happy, fulfilled. You're going to love what you do all day long. Like for me, I help people. That's what I do. And my business today gets me out of bed. Whereas even 7, 8 years ago, I had to get out of bed. I actually liked my business 7, 8 years ago, but I wasn't in love with it. It didn't wake me up in the morning. Today, it wakes me up. I love it. I love sharing stuff like this. I love watching the growth that people get to experience as a result of going through this process. And I get to be a small part of it. It's fantastic. And I get paid really well to do it. I love it. And so that is largely a result of 2 things: having the vision crystal clear, making sure I'm operating within my unique genius zone. And of course, there's more to it that goes into that. That's why we teach it over 3 days, but that'll at least get you started for right now.
So one more time, why don't you just share where they can log on to and the website?
businessvisionworkshop.com. Go straight there. That's going to tell you all information about the 3 days. But as soon as you act like you're going to leave that page, it'll say, hold on, you want some cool stuff. And then it'll give you access to these other free things. Once you put your email address in, you'll be good to go.
Awesome. Well, hey man, I really appreciate you coming on today, and I just appreciate your friendship and all that you've been able to instill in my life. So I really appreciate you jumping on today, because I know you're busy. So I know you're busy. Man, you're busy working 1 day a month. So I'm glad that I'm glad scheduled.
Yeah, I got to go. I got a vacation. I got to be out here in 5 minutes. So. Oh, I love you, man. Thanks for sharing what you share and doing what you do. You're doing some awesome stuff over there as well. So thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Thanks for jumping on, man. It was a blast. So thanks again.
You got it, man. See ya.
Bye.